Robservations with Meyer Burnett.
Well, greetings, imagination connoisseurs. Once again, it is I, your Duke of Dope Discourse, your master of fun and wonder, your viceroy of verisimilitude, your sommelier of sci-fi and cinema, your archbishop of Banterbury, your chancellor of cheerfulness, your evangelist of the imagination, and your existential Mr. Rogers. Wow! Robert Meyer Burnett, and I am robcasting at you imagination connoisseurs, you members of this, the Post-Geek Singularity community. This is Robservations, episode number 612. It's the show about something. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen. This show about something. Gentle beings, kind souls, however you identify across these 28 known galaxies, it's good to have you here. And I've got something on my mind. As a matter of fact, what is that? Verisimilitude. It's not like it's not always on my mind, but verisimilitude. Something that appears, the feeling, the look, the appearance of reality. I've been thinking about it. I've been thinking about it a lot. You know why? Because I've been thinking about Lord of the Rings. Verisimilitude and Lord of the Rings. Is there such a thing? I've been thinking about it. I think there is. And certainly the books have verisimilitude, don't they? Because when you read a book, everything in a good book feels real, doesn't it? I always thought so. But anyway, I was reading an article that has to do with physical media. And as the pharaoh of physical media and thinking about verisimilitude and Lord of the Rings, when I find an article that brings two great tastes together, how could I not want to talk about it? And guess what? Guess what, everyone? I have just the thing to discuss. And this was an article that appeared on the 2nd in Wired. Now, I have to say, I'm a huge fan of Wired. I've loved Wired magazine, and now pretty much Wired online, but the magazine too. I've loved Wired. I think that Wired has been one of the great culture magazines of now almost 30 years. I find Wired to be indispensable in terms of articles about the modern age, delving into things. I love Wired, and there's always something of interest there. Well, they published a really interesting article that got me thinking, and heck, I'm going to share it with you, and perhaps it will get you thinking, too. And here's the article. The article is The No Good, Very Nasty Remastering of The Lord of the Rings. Now, kudos to Jason Kihei. Is it Kihei? Jason Kihei, I think, or Kihei, who wrote this article. And, of course, he's referencing Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good, Very Bad Day, I think, or maybe he's not, which is a favorite children's book. Of course, it was turned into a movie. Now it's going to be another movie. But so I read this. In correcting every imperfection and sharpening every blur of his epic fantasy trilogy, Peter Jackson has violated a fundamental law of nature. What does that mean? Of course, for those of you who don't know, or maybe you're not up on your physical media, Peter Jackson has indeed remastered the Lord of the Rings trilogy and the Hobbit trilogy in 4K for home entertainment release. Also, the entire soundtrack was now remastered in Atmos, and ooh, it's choice. There has been a lot of online scuttlebutt chatter about whether or not this 4K transfer is as good as it is, or is there a lot of DNR, meaning digital noise reduction? Have they screwed with the image too much? There's a lot of commentary on both sides. This, however, does not deal with that. This deals with something else. And I want to jump into it. Look, I see, this is by the article now, it's not me. Listen to this. Okay, here's of course, a picture of Arwen. The poorish, inconsistently color-graded, visually outdated images of Lord of the Rings work in a very literal but also cosmic sort of a way, because they look, by contemporary standards, imperfect, because they look blurry and out of date, like relics from the past. First of all, I don't know if I would agree with that assessment at all. Insomatic sends in a sticker, which I want to thank you, Insomatic, for as we start this chat. It's so strange. This poorish, inconsistently color-graded, visually outdated images of Lord of the Rings. No one who worked on the movie at the time, and I know this because I, of course, worked on the first two films extensively as a documentarian covering Fellowship of the Ring and The Two Towers for years. And I actually did a piece on the color grading of Fellowship, so I won't get into that, but you can watch it on the Fellowship extended versions of the Blu-rays or of the DVDs. And I'll get into this article. Look, I see why Peter Jackson did it. Why he re-released in December of last year his Lord of the Rings trilogy, along with the nasty hobbitses, as I like to call them, channeling Gollum, in so-called 4K Ultra HD, a redundancy. It's a very 21st century filmmaker thing to do, this remastering business. Enrich the colors, sharpen the images, and your films hold up down through the ages. It's practically a moral obligation, a question of clarity, of being clear, and you can clarify Legolas by pumping an extra 10 million pixels into his perfect elven pores, which comes out something like 100 billion photons, all twinkling immortally through the cosmic sweep of space-time. Why then shouldn't you? Is there anything humans demand in this life? If there's anything humans demand in this life, it's that. Greater clarity. Just speak clearly, you scream at politicians, at therapists, at spouses, also at me for writing such a muddy first paragraph. God, it really is a mess. Sinful even, so wordy and wasteful. If clarity, like its cousin cleanliness, is indeed next to godliness, and it is, the word in the original Middle English meant glory, divine, and splendor, then to be unclear is to be unethical, or unoptical, as it were, since optics are the new ethics, at least in corporate America, where all they do is seek clarity on this, visibility into that. I mean, could I be any more clear? More than likely, so let me try. Here's how I should have started this essay. In 2020, everyone went a little bit blind. Because that was COVID for you, in a sense, a great glaring crisis of seeing. Stuck inside, people couldn't see as they were used to seeing. They couldn't see their friends and family except on screens. They couldn't see movies or shows or plays except on screens. And they couldn't see when the crisis would end, not even on screens. If this simulation called reality was crackling along in high def in the before times, it dropped to something like standard definition in 2020, when all glitchy and grainy. Sorry, this connection stinks. As the outside world blurred, though, the inside world upresed. Screens were all that mattered, so they got sharper, prettier, denser, clearer. Everything you think had a record-breaking year in sales did. Big screen TVs with their UHDs and HDRs, iPhone 12s with their OLED displays and 5G speeds, Oculus Quest 2s now with 50% more pixels. Salvation would be achieved through clarity, and there was no resolution better suited to the times than something called 4K. Not a new standard, of course. It began to show up in the mid-2010s, but cocooning at home during the pandemic, as one industry exec put it, has accelerated interest in 4K. Let's recast the metaphor. HD was the caterpillar and 4K the butterfly, bursting forth from its COVID chrysalis and crystallizing entertainment at quadruple the pixel density. The colors were dazzling, a truly heightened display. Classics like Lawrence of Arabia and Hitchcock Collection, all the way down to every last Rambo and Resident Evil. By the way, I want to point out I have all of those that I got this year in 4K. We're 4K'd in 2020, not to mention video games, TV shows, and Top Gun to boot. Binge watchers had been blind, now they could see. So look, I get why Peter Jackson capitalized on the accelerated interest, why he remastered his trilogies in 4K and just in time for the holiday season of a year in which an acute crisis of seeing collided with a chronic resolution fetish to produce a new market for the illusion of reality. But let me be clear, crystal if I can, what a no-good, anti-human, unoptical thing for this man to do. Peter Jackson has never met a special effect he hasn't tried to perfect, from the non-technical and old-fashioned like forced perspective so Frodo looks small, to the next-gen and physics-defying like mocapping a bipedal human actor into a four-legged fire-breathing dragon. He's a master manipulator of bodies in space. In the case of Lord of the Rings, it worked. Magically, little people, convincingly and very emotionally, saved an enormous world. And then he made The Nasty Hobbitses. As a book, The Hobbit is everything Lord of the Rings is not. Short, silly, and stupid. Not that Jackson understood this. When he read it, he mainly saw that big, scary dragon. In fact, he has suggested that he couldn't make the films until the effects for such a beast were ready for him to exploit. Instead of thinking about how to make a story of an annoying middle-aged shut-in forced to venture outside actually, compellingly tellable, he was thinking visually and financially. It would be 3 movies then, silly, stupid, and not at all short. But that's not the worst part. The worst part is that he seems to think he succeeded. That the look of these movies, pixels flashing in 48 hyperreal frames per second, is enough to justify their existence. So much so that he'd come to look back on Lord of the Rings with regret. Over the years, the imperfection in his original trilogy began in his mind to show, hence the 4K remaster. Quote, "We got the opportunity to go back and to remove and paint out imperfections," he says in a promotional video for the new Blu-rays, as animators retouch the scene with the Balrog. "It's fun to have all the new toys. I shouldn't have all this stuff to play with in the old days. Now that he does, all 6 movies consist," Jackson says, "of pristine, sharp, ultra-crisp images." In her essay, which I'm going to get to later, in defense of the poor image, the filmmaker and media theorist Hito Steyerl, Steyerl, Steril, defines an imperfect cinema as resolutely compromised, blurred, amateurish, and full of artifacts. She's talking about underground, anti-elitist, anti-capitalist art, which Jackson's cinema is resolutely far from. But the poorish, inconsistently color-graded, visually outdated images of his first Lord of the Rings can be defended on similar grounds. The reason they work, in a very literal but also cosmic sort of way, is precisely because they look, by contemporary standards, imperfect. Because they look blurry and out of date, like relics from the past. What humans perceive as the linear flow of time, first Jackson made The Lord of the Rings and then he made The Nasty Hobbitses, is tied very deeply, if most unfathomably, to the direction of entropy. If you saw Christopher Nolan's latest VFX showcase, Tenet, you might follow, or not. That empty excuse for a film won't make sense in any era at any time. What's known as this: the early universe had more order to it, and the universe today has less. The glass breaks, disorder increases, and time seems to move forward. But who's to say the broken glass or the much-invoked deck of cards that was arranged numerically and by color, but now is shuffled and therefore disordered, makes any less sense in its chaotic form? The notion of certain configurations being more peculiar than others, 26 red cards followed by 26 black cards, for example, makes sense only if I limit myself to noticing only certain aspects of the cards, in this case the colors, writes the theoretical physicist Carlo Rovelli in The Order of Time, like a brief history of, but beautifully written. If I distinguish between all the cards, the configurations are all equivalent. None of them is more or less particular than the others. Of course, the human brain cannot make such a fine-grained distinction. As the cards are shuffled, the brain loses track of any meaningful relationship between them. The patterns and peculiarities, once so apparent, are now said to blur. The difference between past and future, Rovelli writes, is deeply linked to this blurring. Confused? Let me try to be clearer. When things get unclear, you know time is passing. Blurring is the reason people can exist as physical beings in time. If your brain could somehow perceive a broken glass as a pattern identical to that of the unshattered glass, because on a subatomic level they basically are the same, you would transcend time, but you can't, so you're stuck here, living and inevitably dying in a world where the imperfectly perfect Nasty Hobbitses are the standard by which Peter Jackson judges his perfectly imperfect Lord of the Rings, where he remasters the latter in a style of the former, a violation of nature of the order of time. In a way, it's God's work. By fine-tuning his images, by increasing their resolution, Jackson is making the patterns easier to perceive. He's de-blurring the meaning behind the shuffled deck, sculpting richer life from the mud of the past. But Jackson is not God. He's a director of high fantasy, and that's the wrong genre to unentropically re-engineer. All stories should be allowed to get blurry in our memories of them, but fantasies most of all because they're so close to our dreams. We don't dream in high resolution. We wake up, and the dragons fade. Look, I can write a clear sentence. Peter Jackson should not have remastered Lord of the Rings. Here's another. COVID makes it hard to think about the future. Or I can write a blurred, amateurish essay instead, full of artifacts and stray thoughts, imperfections and improbabilities that might suggest something more. Something about vision, about seeing a way forward, something about heaven, and the unclarities that help get us there. So I read this article in Wired, and honestly, I kind of hated it. Because first of all, what you're talking about, what the author was talking about in this essay is home video. It's video. He wasn't talking about the original camera elements. He wasn't talking about the original scanned or the negative and how the negative was scanned in and meticulously manipulated, color, clarity, all of that originally. He's not talking about that. He's talking about specifically about this particular way of remastering films. And this kind of made me angry, only because, I mean, I love 4K, and as I just pointed out in the show that I was on, when the Beastmaster comes out in his beautiful, beautiful edition from Vinegar Syndrome, why wouldn't you want it in 4K? What is the point of having something in 4K? Well, 4K best replicates, hopefully, the original elements that were finished by the filmmakers. When you're remastering something in 4K, theoretically, you're not really changing it. I mean, you're changing the very medium it's on. You're changing it from being on celluloid with light being projected through it that shows up on a screen to being electronically presented across, well, an entirely different way of seeing. But what the whole point of 4K is supposed to do is most replicate the original source material as it was finished when the filmmakers made it in the first place. So this idea that somehow remastering something in 4K is bad, and the whole idea that, oh, things should be blurry because memories fade. Well, hopefully art doesn't. Should the Mona Lisa get blurry through time? I mean, I know the pyramids probably don't have as sharp edges as they used to because of wind and rain and the elements, but the pyramids are still here. Maybe the pyramids indeed are a little less or a little more blurry than they were when they began. But there's no reason to not want to see art in the highest resolution possible, to see it in the best possible format. Isn't that what we want? Don't we want the best experience of it? Now, there are times I have railed against things like colorization. I don't believe that if a movie was shot in black and white during the time it was made, should it be colorized? And I'm going to say something, and people are going to object to what I just said. They're going to say, didn't you just contradict yourself? And I'm going to say this. So, one of my favorite movies of all time, when I was a little kid, I've talked about this before, was 1953's the George Pall production of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, directed by Byron Haskin. It's one of my favorite, but still, one of my favorite movies of all time. When I was 5 years old, 6 years old, it blew my mind. I loved it so much because the Martians killed a priest, and if the Martians could kill a priest and God couldn't protect that priest, well then, anything could happen. And that was that was an important lesson for a 5-year-old to learn. But anyway, watching that movie, the war machines, the beautiful war machines, as they ascended from the gully they crashed in, you could see all of the wires. You could see them all. The war machine was held aloft by many wires, and they did what they could to hide those wires, but you could still see them, especially on home video. When they brightened up the image, you saw those wires, man, and they were there all for a long time. Now, in our digital age, War of the Worlds was remastered in 4K. It was released by 2 different video companies around the world, one being Criterion, the other being Insignia in Australia. And they released beautiful new versions of War of the Worlds. And one of the things that they did when they were remastering War of the Worlds was remove the wires. So you couldn't see them anymore. Now, a lot of people would say, well, Rob, isn't that meddling with the image? And I would say no. I would say no because at the time, they didn't want the wires to show. They hoped they wouldn't show. And they'd want them to go away if they could. So I don't think that taking the wires out of a remaster of 1953's War of the Worlds is a bad thing. I don't think so. I think that was a good thing, and I think it enhances the enjoyment of the film. On the other hand, now some people might say, well, Rob, a lot of filmmakers might have wanted to make their movies in color. but they didn't. They made them in black and white for whatever reason. So why shouldn't we colorize those movies? And I would say to you that you should not. Because at the time, first of all, people made black and white movies in the color era. Black and white is shot a specific way. The way films are lit, exposed. The filmmakers knew that they were making a black and white movie. So the way they were made was to be black and white. To colorize those movies is to actually mess around with the intent of the original filmmakers. Now, the intent of the original filmmakers in War of the Worlds was not to have their wires showing on the Martian war machines. They intended for the Martian war machines to not have wires because they're supposed to appear like real Martian war machines. And if they have wires on them, it betrays that illusion. We realize it's just a model being held aloft in a studio, in a soundstage, or in a miniature stage. And it shatters the verisimilitude of what you're watching. Now, a lot of people might say, well, Rob, how can a black and white movie have verisimilitude at all? Because the world isn't in black and white. Well, I would say, just like anything, verisimilitude is unto itself. So when you're watching a black and white movie and you know it's a black and white movie, there is no verisimilitude shattered because it's simply in black and white, because that's what it is. It is black and white. There's nothing, there's no other choice. It's a black and white movie. So you have to ask yourself, understanding that, do you believe what you're watching within the confines of that film? Do the characters seem believable? Does everything else within the proscenium of the frame, is it believable? I would say, well, if it is, then you have verisimilitude, and that's what you're seeking. That's what all filmmakers are seeking. Look, all movies are lies. They're all lies. 24 frames a second, they're lying to you. It's all made up. None of it's real. The films themselves are all lies, but the magic within a film, did it convey truth to you? Did all of those collective lies come together to create a truth of the human spirit, a truth of conveying something about human existence that is, in fact, true, that you can recognize as truth? Did it do that? That's what's amazing about movies, is if there is verisimilitude, if they make you believe, well, then they work. When you're making a high fantasy epic, do you think that Peter Jackson wanted the seams to show in his movies? No, he was trying to create Middle-earth to be an unbelievably real place. Now, of course, yes, he was limited. The Fellowship, they were made in 1999. They started shooting those movies 22 years ago. Oh my God, I'm so old. But he wanted them to be as real as possible. And ultimately, when he was done with The Hobbit, whether it should have been 3 movies or not is not for me to debate. They are 3 movies, so I'm not going to talk about shoulda, coulda, woulda. We have 3 Hobbit movies. And the idea of making all 6 movies work together as a piece is okay. Now, to me, when you're putting something on home video, you are translating the original film to another medium. So you are not, by definition, giving somebody an exact recreation or replication of what it was like to watch that movie in a theater. By the very definition of, it's not being projected. I mean, you could say, well, you got digital projection in a theater, which is closer to the truth if you're going to talk about manipulating images digitally. Because now most movies are digitally projected. But at the time, while they digitally graded The Hobbit, they still had a negative of it. I mean, of Lord of the Rings. But this idea of remastering movies in 4K, what they want to do is replicate the intentions of the original filmmakers at the time the movie was made. That's why one of the reasons I'm such a big fan of 4K is it gives you the ability to do that, to present the film. Like, look, the big frustrating thing about being a filmmaker is that when you were making an actual film and your film existed as a print, first of all, it's a different generation from the original negative, so it never looked exactly as sharp as the negative looked. And then when you go project it, every time you run it through a projector, the image is somehow diminished. There's dirt on it, hair, the changeover, the cigarette burns get a little raggedy at the end of every reel. You'd see the celluloid get scratched. So for most of human history that we had cinema, you couldn't see movies in optimal presentations unless you saw, well, maybe the first show of a film. But every time you went back, it would be diminished a little bit. And who wants that? What filmmaker wants that? No filmmakers want that. So what 4K allows people to do, it allows filmmakers to go in and hopefully future-proof, preserve for the next generation their films. Hopefully they'll stick around for a long time. They will be the best, the most optimal versions of those movies. Now, in the case of Peter Jackson, yes, the Lord of the Rings films, the first 3 Lord of the Rings films, were very iterative. They were an ongoing process. Sometimes if they needed a green screen shot, they would take a green screen out into the parking lot and shoot a horse and a rider rearing back so they could cut it into the movie. A lot of the movie was digitally altered. They did shoot it out in real locations, so the light was always changing, which is something that happens with anyone who's shooting on location. So this idea that somehow the degradation of the image, the fact that the images aren't as crisp or as clear as they could be, that adds to the verisimilitude of Lord of the Rings, well, that's debatable. But what I would think is that what you want to preserve is the intent of the filmmakers. No filmmakers want to have any of their images blurry, but sometimes they are. And there's nothing you can do about it. And I'll tell you, not one filmmaker who's ever had to use a blurry shot, whether that was the only take they had or whether it was the best take and that's the one that they went with, no filmmaker would ever say, I'd much rather have this shot as blurry as crystal clear. No filmmaker, no one who ever rolled film or digitally captured an image wants their image to be anything other than razor sharp. It does not add anything to see work diminished. You want to have it in the best light possible. Now, there have been people that have some very interesting analysis of the Lord of the Rings 4K transfers and the objections to using digital noise reduction. But there's always been objections to the Lord of the Rings transfers on home video, as there is to most transfers. Lately I've seen, for the first time in my life, I've seen transfers that finally, I've said on the show, whether it's Die Hard or whether it's The Matrix, seeing them in 4K, they finally look the way they're supposed to look on home video, which we never got before, even in HD, because some things just didn't translate that well. But in my mind, what you want as a filmmaker is to have the very best quality image. And the idea that our television signals, which were garbage for the most part, they couldn't replicate near what the resolution of film was. We were watching a very, very, very diminished image, even though we didn't really know how diminished it was. But going from basically our television standard, which was 640 by 480 pixels, and going up all the way to what we can get now, 4096 by 1716 pixels if you're watching a widescreen 4K presentation, it's amazing. It's amazing how far we've come. And I would say this idea, this sort of retro hipster idea that Peter Jackson, look, I'm not going to get into whether the Hobbit movies are good or not, but I don't like it when an article like this calls them stupid. Maybe it was stupid. I didn't think the original book was stupid. Just because a book is written for children doesn't mean it's stupid. And as far as children's books go, The Hobbit is a pretty good one. So I kind of thought this article was hipster nonsense. And in being that it was in Wired, it bothered me because I was like, come on, Wired, what are you doing? But anyway, I understand where this person kind of was coming from. I get this idea that you can say, oh, let's degrade the image. I don't want to see the best image the negative provided. I want to see an image that's a little crappier, so it makes me what? You feel better about the fact that it takes place in Middle-earth, that somehow there's more verisimilitude created when the image is shitty because it looks like an old-time photograph or something. I don't buy that. I don't think that's true. I don't think that's true at all, especially that's not what the intent was. The intent is always to create the best images possible, unless, of course, you're going for something artistic, like the invasion of Normandy in Schindler's List. They're using 45-degree angles on the shutters, or they're doing something different to create that combat photography look, in which case the image is being degraded, and it's also being whipped around as a combat photographer would to create more verisimilitude in that situation of storming the beaches at Dog One in Schindler's List. Now, here's another article that's referenced in this, I think it's sterile. I think it's Hito sterile. Sterile? Or sterile? I don't know. And this is the article here. And this is an interesting article. I'm not going to read this whole thing, but I'll put it in the, oops, I didn't mean to do that. I had to look it up. In defense of the poor image. I'm going to put this in the live chat, so if you all desire, you can all read this article along with me, because I'm not going to read the whole thing. But, again, I kind of thought this article was poppycock. In defense of the poor image. The poor image is a copy in motion. Its quality is bad, its resolution substandard. As it accelerates, it deteriorates. It is a ghost of an image, a preview, a thumbnail, an errant idea, an itinerant image distributed for free, squeezed through slow digital connections, compressed, reproduced, ripped, remixed, as well as copied and pasted onto other channels of distribution. A poor image is a rag or a rip, an AVI or a JPEG, a lumpen proletarian in the class society of appearances, ranked and valued according to its resolution. The poor image has been uploaded, downloaded, shared, reformatted, and re-edited. It transforms quality into accessibility, exhibition value into cult value, films into clips, contemplation into distraction. The image is liberated from the vaults of cinemas and archives and thrust into digital uncertainty at the expense of its own substance. The poor image tends toward abstraction. It is a visual idea in its very becoming. The poor image is an illicit fifth-generation bastard of original image. Its genealogy is dubious. Its file names are deliberately misspelled. It often defies patrimony, national culture, or indeed copyright. It is passed on as a lure, a decoy, an index, or as a reminder of its former visual self. It mocks the promises of digital technology. Not only is it often degraded to the point of being just a harried blur, one even doubts whether it could be called an image at all. Only digital technology could produce such a dilapidated image in the first place. Poor images are the contemporary wretched of the screen, the debris of audiovisual production, the trash that washes up on the digital economy's shores. They testify to the violent dislocation, transferals, and displacement of images, their acceleration and circulation within the vicious cycles of audiovisual capitalism. Poor images are dragged around the globe as commodities or their effigies, as gifts or as bounty. They spread pleasure or death threats, conspiracy theories or bootlegs, resistance or stultification. Poor images show the rare, the obvious, the unbelievable. That is, if we can still manage to decipher it. Look at that. And I'm just going to read this first part. Low resolutions. In one of Woody Allen's films, the main character is out of focus. It's not a technical problem, but some sort of disease that has befallen him. His image is constantly blurred. Since Allen's character is an actor, this becomes a major problem. He's unable to find work. His lack of definition turns into a material problem. Focus is defined as a class position, a position of ease and privilege, while being out of focus lowers one's value as an image. The contemporary hierarchy of images, however, is not only based on sharpness, but also and primarily on resolution. Just look at any electronics store, and this system, described by Harun Faraki in a notable 2007 interview, becomes immediately apparent. In the class society of images, cinema takes on the role of a flagship store. In flagship stores, high-end products are marked in an upscale environment. More affordable derivatives of the same image circulate as DVDs on broadcast television or online as poor images. Obviously, high-resolution image looks more brilliant and impressive, more mimetic and magic, more scary and seductive than a poor one. It is more rich, so to speak. Now even consumer formats are increasingly adapting to the tastes of cineasts and aesthetes, who insist on 35mm film as a guarantee of pristine visuality. The insistence upon analog film as the sole medium of visual importance resounded throughout discourses on cinema, almost regardless of their ideological inflection. It never mattered that these high-end economies of film production were, and still are, firmly anchored in systems of national culture, capitalist studio production, the cult of mostly male genius, and the original version, and thus are often conservative in their very structure. Resolution was fetishized as if its lack amounted to castration of the author. The cult of image gauge dominated even independent film production. The rich image established its own set of hierarchies, with new technologies offering more and more possibilities to creatively degrade it. Okay. I have to say, what a load of hooey. I mean, the whole point of making visual images, if you want to make a visual image to convey, now I'm not saying degraded images or grainy images, there can be artistic intent behind all of them. But I will tell you, when you are making a film, whether it's Lord of the Rings, whether it's Star Wars, or whether it's Lawrence of Arabia, what everybody is looking for is to create the best images possible, the clearest, most visceral images possible, unless, of course, your intent, and we all know what that artistic intent is. I think the Omaha Beach attack in the beginning of Schindler's List is a perfect example. Sometimes you don't want to have your images because for whatever reason, a story or something, you want to show a memory, and the way you show or convey a memory is to show it being very black and white or grainy or something, in which case we're conveying that you're using a visual motif to create a memory. So you don't want it to be totally crisp and clear, but that doesn't work unless everything before it and after it is crisp and clear, so you can convey the idea that it is a memory. Well, when it comes to Lord of the Rings or any other film, what you want is you want it to look the best for the audience. How will the audience best be conveyed your movie? Now, I think sometimes, as in the case of Star Wars, the remastering of Star Wars that we saw beginning in 1997 was problematic because every time you cut to a completely CG-derived image or segment, such as Jabba the Hutt being intercut with Han Solo, it looked very jarring, and verisimilitude was shattered. One of the great things about the original Star Wars is that because most of it was shot on location with practical effects, until you cut to miniatures, but even the miniatures, they felt like they had verisimilitude to them because they were miniatures and they were shot that way. Seldom did you see miniature shots combined with live action elements, but when you did, even those were done pretty well. And what you're looking for is to create that kind of verisimilitude. So nowadays we live in a land where 4K best replicates film. And the way we basically see in 4K. So the idea that somehow images should be degraded for some kind of, I don't know, that it's to represent the proletariat, I don't believe in that at all. I know that in this day and age, with the kind of images that are available to all of us, we all want the best images possible. As a matter of fact, when we see images of ourselves that we've taken that we wish were better, we get the tools right on our phones to make them better, so I can insta that shit right away. And I think the idea that Peter Jackson, in creating the Lord of the Rings movies, is not trying to create the best visual experience he possibly can for his audience is absurd. There's nothing wrong with wanting your movie, your artwork, to look the best it can be. And in this day and age, we have the tools and we have the talent to make that possible. And I think when we live in that time, and the time we are living in now, and we can get rid of the wires on the Martian war machine, as opposed to leaving them, why wouldn't we get rid of those wires? If ultimately it helps the intent of the original movie, I don't believe colorizing a black and white film does that at all, because you can't effectively colorize a movie that was shot in black and white because it wasn't lit to be in color. It was lit to be black and white, and you'll never be able to change that. I mean, maybe at some point deep learning AI could, but why would you want to? I would hope that deep learning AI, if somebody asks an AI, hey, can you go in and colorize Casablanca forever, that an AI would say, nope, not going to do it. not going to colorize your Casablanca, even though it's been colorized before. But the people that did that are idiots. And I think ultimately what's most important is to preserve the original intent of any art. Because ultimately, the people that are alive today, as much as they might have good intentions, unless you have people working on the original film when it was made back in 1939 or whenever it was made, whatever movie you're talking about, 41, unless they're coming back to help you put that film into a different medium, such as a 4K disc, well then, you shouldn't try and second guess or change the original intent of the artists. What you should try and do is to best preserve those intents as best you know how. And I just thought it was such a weird thing to say, look, I used to be a video pirate when I was a teenager. I copied movies. I went into movie theaters with a video camera after paying off a manager or paying off a projectionist, or sometimes, or most of the time, both, and took a video camera that was 640 by 480 at best, and filmed a screen and tried to get some semblance of the movie theater experience recreated at home. But let me tell you, it was terrible and it never worked. And for a long, 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 long time, many years, I wish to God I had something that looked better than the god-awful bootleg videotapes I used to deal in. I mean, there were images of movies that were exactly like these articles said. You could barely see them. They were blurry. They were gauzy. They were noisy. And every single time I watched any of those images, and some of the time it was the only ones you could get. I had movies before they, like Star Wars or Fantasia or E.T. or Maniac, Joe Spinell in Maniac. I had that movie. I had a bootleg copy of Maniac before it even played on the West Coast. Did I feel guilty? No. Sorry, Bill Lustig. I apologize, but I did have it. But I always wanted it to be better. I wanted to see Tom Savini's gore effects in pristine quality that you can get now. And this idea that somehow degraded images are something to be sought after or lauded or whatever is ridiculous. The great thing about the world that we live in now is we can get the very best images possible. We can get films to look better than they looked even when they played in the theater for the first time, when you have colorists and post-production supervisors who know what they're doing. I don't want to go back to an age where images are not good. I never want to go back. I want the best images possible, forever, now and always. So I just thought it was interesting to me that don't diss on Peter Jackson because he wants to make his films look the best they can look. Wouldn't you? Anyway, that's what I wanted to talk about today. And you know what? You guys certainly have a lot on your mind. And we're going to delve into that. I have a lot of letters because I wasn't here yesterday. I almost wasn't here today. But man, there's a lot to talk about. A lot to talk about. Who's first? Dennis Chip Chapman is first today. Hello, Dennis Chip Chapman. Hello, Rob. I am a wildly avid viewer and a proud member of the Post-Geek Singularity. Well, thank you for being a member of the Post-Geek Singularity, and thanks for being an avid viewer. Many of your comments have convinced me we are both parked in the same shuttle bay. Thanks to you and John Campia, I am surviving lockdown in the beautiful paradise of COVID hell's half-acre, South Florida. Your passion for all things film, television, and print entertainment, and your sense of wonder for all things fantasy, horror, and science fiction are what set you apart from the usual YouTube chatter. Your innate intelligence, sense of humor, self-deprecating demeanor, drive for personal improvement, and new products, and belief in fair play is what makes you, for me, a destination location of the ultimate verisimilitude. Let me indulge. That's very nice. I did not pay him to write that. And I just want to say thank you. I very much appreciate that. Dennis or Chip, very nice of you to say, so thank you. Let me indulge in some nostalgia from a guy who has really got both legs knee-deep in the grave. Allow me to impart to you my history of verisimilitude. Chin up, Rob. You are younger than you think, brah. I haven't always been a 70-year-old sweaty. A salute to the memory of John Schnepp. My favorite recollections at 8 or 9, when I wasn't writing original Batman stories in math class, were being obsessed with rock and roll and the purchaser and trader of late 50s comic book adventures. Superman and Batman and Soup's secondary titles. Then into the 60s as the Silver Age began. Dude, it was Showcase with The Flash, Carmine Infantino, and Gardner Rock, son. Then Green Arrow, Green Lantern, The Atom, Martian Manhunter, and finally, the Justice League of America. Great sci-fi with cardboard characters, but so what? Imagine my shock when I picked up the early copies of Fantastic Four, one issue of Amazing Fantasy with a cat named Spider-Man, then the veiled racial strife of the mistrusted X-Men, the early Hulk, Tales of Suspense Iron Man, Journey into Mystery Thor, and Tales to Astonish Ant-Man and the Wasp. Although I kind of dug the 50s DC Batwoman, Kathy Kane, the Wasp was my first superheroine crush. What the hell, Henry Pym? You keep dissing Janet, and she can come live with me. Sorry, old teenage hormones ramping up. Check out John Buscema's art in The Avengers, and you'll see what I mean. Apologies to the Black Widow, who was a villain in the comics until the 70s. Then came my British heroes, the Beatles, the Stones, the Who, Cream, and all the rest, who saved rock and roll while my wonder list of comics went on with Strange Tales, Doctor Strange, the emergence of my beloved Avengers, the addition of Captain America and Tales of Suspense, and the new Giant Man shared Tales to Astonish with Prince Namor, the Submariner. Bye-bye, Aquaman. Then from Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos, Nick Fury became an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. It was great art. From Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, Bill Everett, Gil Kane, Adam Austin, a.k.a. Gene Colan, Wally Wood, and others, plus brilliant stories and characterization from Stan the Man Lee. But here's the deal. I actually owned all of these books. They weren't reprints until decades later, man. I'm sitting here thinking about what it would be like to have those books right now as I read this. Imagine the thrill of reading all this stuff straight from the spinner rack. Kids, comics. I, too, was a proud member of the Merry Marvel Marching Society. Why do I think Marvel beat out DC in the 60s? The Avengers and Verisimilitude. Then, when great artists and writers got sick of the antics of the two big companies, they worked on the amazing Tower Comics Thunder Agents in 1966. More Verisimilitude. In television in the 50s and 60s, I watched everything. However, decades later, I can only rewatch the best of the best. And this list is by no means complete. Anything Warner Brothers cartoon related. Meep, meep. Jackie Gleason's The Honeymooners. George Reeves' The Adventures of Superman. Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone. There's still a signpost up ahead. Joseph Stefano's The Original Outer Limits. The Rifleman. Uncredited screen creation of Sam Peckinpah. And Roy Huggins' The Fugitive. In the mid to late 60s, my faves were My Favorite Martian, Combat, The Addams Family, The Man from U.N.C.L.E., The Avengers, Mrs. Peel, You're Needed. Yep, sure was. Space 1999, The Prisoner, Dark Shadows, and Patty Duke. Biggest TV crush, guilty pleasure, 2-for-1. My number one for all time, from the swinging 60s, Star Trek. I just want to point out Space 1999 was 70s, just saying. Star Trek, the original and still the best. But like you, Rob, the Trek of the new 2020 decade is not mine. No freaking way. What makes all these 1950s and 60s shows so important to me? Verisimilitude. What movies rocked my world in the 50s and 60s? Down the street from the spinner rack in a drugstore in my teenage downtown Orlando was my favorite theater with 50-cent matinees every Saturday. I watched serials in black and whites, classics from the 40s and 50s, including all the Universal Monsters and King Kong. I saw Gone with the Wind, wow, and that piece of crap, The Guns of Navarone. David Niven, shut the hell up and show me the guns already. But I fell in love with the amazing and truly awful sci-fi films of the 50s. God, the list is so long. Here's a few of the best. Invasion of the Body Snatchers, The Day the Earth Stood Still, Them, The Fly, Forbidden Planet, The Thing from Another World, This Island Earth, The Incredible Shrinking Man, War of the Worlds, Earth vs. the Flying Saucers, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, On the Beach, and the Hammer movies. My favorite fantasy film is from the 50s, Darby O'Gill and the Little People. My number one jump scare of all time is that Banshee, and it's a Disney movie. My mainstream favorites from the 50s and 60s include Some Like It Hot, Sunset Boulevard, North by Northwest, The Ten Commandments, Rebel Without a Cause, Ben-Hur, and A Night to Remember. My 60s filmology includes Psycho, The Magnificent Seven, Goldfinger, Dr. Strangelove, Thunderball, Easy Rider, Rosemary's Baby, Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf, and Cold Blood, A Hard Day's Night, Romeo and Juliet, Mutiny on the Bounty, The Alamo, The Parent Trap, Failsafe, Midnight Cowboy, and Night of the Living Dead. Rob, my favorite horror movie of all time is Romero's Dawn of the Dead. Oh, my man. I would say that like Denzel Washington in Training Day, but I don't think I can do it as well as he could. There's that park shuttlecraft I mentioned. Closing out the 60s, Barefoot in the Park, Yellow Submarine, Easy Rider, 7 Days in May, Lolita, Marnie, Carnival of Souls, Valley of the Dolls, Guilty Pleasure, Patty Duke again with Barbara Perkins and Sharon Tate, The Graduate, Alice's Restaurant, You're a Big Boy Now, On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and Assault on a Queen. A Sinatra actioner written by Rod Serling. Almost all are contenders with Verisimilitude. Anyway, you can imagine after growing up firsthand with all that and then experiencing Iron Man and the Avengers for the first time on the big screen, hey, who's that gray-haired fella in the back row with tears running down his face? That would be me. I've been so fucking fortunate to live long enough to see almost everything come to the movie screen that I lived and loved firsthand from the comic books. Yes, sir. Thank you, Kevin Feige, for doing everything marvelous with Verisimilitude. Thank you, Christopher Nolan and Zack Snyder, for giving me Batman and Superman with no silly camp, only Verisimilitude. I only have one regret. When I was 15, 16, and marrying age in my 20s, where the hell were the hot fangirls that love comics and cosplay and hanging out on YouTube? Damn it, that would have made my young life completely remarkable. I feel the same way. I hope you and Campia realize how lucky you are to be with special, fun-loving ladies like Elizabeth and Anne. Good for you. Because you, my friend, and John Campia embody verisimilitude. One more thing, Rob. I realized we were kindred spirits when somebody recently mentioned General Hospital, and you said something about a character from the show named Felicia. I've been watching since 1980. Great guilty pleasure. No verisimilitude, but so many women, so little time. Like we used to say back in the 60s, wave your freak flag high, never lose your sense of wonder. Remember, the love you take is equal to the love you make. Paul McCartney is an incredibly wise man because he, too, is full to the brim with verisimilitude. I remain Dennis Chip Chapman. Come on, man. This has to be one of my favorite letters I've read on this show. First of all, hearing from a 70-year-old imagination connoisseur, that alone, you know, what is that? Priceless. Thank you so much, Chip. Call you Chip. An amazing letter. What a trip down memory lane. And again, you know, we might have more stuff now, but there's always been imagination connoisseurs, especially in the 20th century, and we forget that sometimes. And what a joy it must have been to have grown up and had what you had. And you didn't know you were going to get Star Wars. You didn't know you were going to get Alien. You didn't know you were going to get, well, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And like you said, you were the guy in the back, the gray-haired man in the back, crying tears of joy. What must, you know, I wonder, as I read this letter, I was talking about on the stream I was on before this, what it was like to see the Avengers for the first time. And, you know, I was sitting next to Derek Hughes and Nikki Griffin, and I'm just like, I can't believe, in my mind, I'm like, I can't believe I couldn't believe it existed. I couldn't believe I was watching an Avengers movie in the theater. I mean, I knew it was coming. I saw the MCU films leading up to it. I've been seeing the Marvel movies, you know, since really Blade, and watching it evolve. But when seeing the Avengers for the first time, it wasn't like seeing Star Wars, which was completely mind-blowing. But it was still, I mean, seeing the Avengers was still the realization, like you pointed out, of this childhood fever dream fantasy that you had while reading comic books. You're like, wouldn't it be cool if? And you never thought it was going to happen. 2012, there it was. And as long, Dennis, I think more than ever, or more than anything, just because we love Dawn of the Dead, I think what your letter conveyed to me is the same joie de vivre I've had for all of this stuff my entire life. And you're proof positive that it does not go away. Not now and not ever. What a great letter. You know what? I'm ending the show. I'm leaving. No, I'm just kidding. But what a great letter. Thanks. I appreciate that. You've brightened my day. And I can't. How can I not love that letter? That letter was just what a delight. Liam Kelly writes in. Liam Kelly says, "Greetings, sir. My name is Liam, and I am from the Emerald Island of Ireland. I've written to you long ago when Corona was merely a beer. I'm just 16 years of age. Contrary to my generation stereotype of having the attention span of a goldfish, I have a great passion for a lot of things, especially for geek culture in general. It makes me feel a certain sense of home that I struggle to find in other communities that are just not for me. Sports. I've always felt more comfortable debating who would win in a fight, Darkseid or Thanos. Darkseid, obviously. Etc. Than talking about who is my favorite soccer player or team. Anyways, that all is beside the point. I want to write. From the day I first picked up a pen, I've had a yearning to keep improving my writing capabilities. I've written stories, many stories. I've gone through hundreds, if not thousands of copies in my childhood, writing the most atrocious stories imaginable. Believe me, it was no Shakespeare. Probably was better than Jack and Jill, to be fair to me. Ever since I became the hormonal monster that is a teenager, my creative juices have been flowing faster than ever. I began to watch more film pundits and analysts and lovers like yourself, and have gained a passion for film. This reached its peak in September of 2020 when I came across an idea in the deepest avenues of my mind. An idea for a screenplay. As soon as I realized that I had it, I got to work. I bought screenplay books. I read and read and read. I wrote down any inspiration that came to mind. I wrote out my entire plot from beginning to end. I was afraid that my passion would be well lost by the end of 2020, as I was returning to school where creativity can be sometimes snuffed out. Alas, I never lost faith or love or passion in my idea, so much so that last month I began work on an early draft of a screenplay for it. It's cringe, and it's horrendous. But I will just get the skeleton out first and add the meat later on. Good for you. 30 pages in, afraid to reread it. The thing is, Rob, I have no idea where to go. I don't know who I can show this script to once it is completed. I live in Ireland, so Scorsese wouldn't be living down the road from me. Also, I'm 16 after all, so no producer will accept it from me, surely. I was wondering if you have any advice for what I should do with it. I don't want my passion to just sit there on my laptop unread. I hope you are doing well and staying safe and healthy. Sending the Irish luck your way. And in case I don't see you, good afternoon, good evening, and good night. 70 and 16. Come on, man. What's not to love on this show? Great letter, Liam. Well, first of all, before worrying about who you're going to show the screenplay to, you got to finish the screenplay. You said you're 30 pages in and you're afraid to read it. My advice is don't. Don't fall into the screenwriter's trap of going back and rereading your work and rewriting the first 50 pages or 30 pages 25 times. You must, young Liam, soldier through. Write down, finish the entire screenplay. And then go back and reread it. And reread it all the way through. Reread the whole thing, maybe 3 or 4 times. Reread it again and again and again. Think about it. Contemplate it. Spend a week going over what you'd already written. Don't do anything. Just reread it. See how it hits you. And then begin the process of rewriting. And by the way, during that week, take some notes. Things that strike you. Read it aloud. Maybe read it to someone, knowing they'll know that it's just your first draft. Do whatever you have to do. Be contemplative. But then you sit down and you begin the tough process of rewriting it again. And then you do the same thing. Do it 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, however long it takes, man. But you can hone that screenplay down. Make it sing until you think it's great. And then, here's what I want you to do. I want you to send me the first 5 pages, and I'll read them aloud on this show. And we'll all decide what you should do with it then. But you can't give up. You must finish. You must finish, Liam. That's what it means to be 16, to not finish and not care. But you're ahead of the game, sir. And I would suggest you do what I tell you. Because I now want to read your script. I want to know what it's about. I don't want to know, when you send me the 5 pages, I don't want to know anything about it. Don't tell me shit. I don't even want to know the title until afterwards. But send me those 5 pages. But not until you're sure of those 5 pages. Because you know what? You only get one chance. And we'll know. I'll tell you something. As a professional screenplay reader for a number of years, you can tell if a script is worth a damn after page 1. You can. But we'll give you 5 pages, young Liam. And you don't have to, by the way. If you're scared to send it in, I understand. And I won't make fun of you. I look forward to it. As a matter of fact, I demand it. I expect. You know what? I'm going to give you a time limit. We're having a short story contest too, by the way. You should submit to that. Yeah. The whole imagination connoisseur community is awaiting your words. Our friend Enterprise HNCC 1701H writes in, The Art Ascendant. Greetings. First, since you said that you knew people and worked on the show Andromeda, would you happen to know who designed the Andromeda Ascendant? I'd like to know who is behind that iconic design. Secondly, are you planning to go back on the Critical Drinker After Hours to discuss the 25th anniversary one day? You know what? Tell you what I can do. I don't know who designed the Andromeda Ascendant, but I'm going to call somebody who might. Somebody who is just on this show. He might not answer, but we'll see. I love being able to call people on the phone. This would be, if he picks up, Ashley Miller, who wrote X-Men First Class and Thor. What? I got dissed. Did you hear that? Drop the call. Maybe he dropped the phone. Hey. Mr. Miller, I am live on Robservations, and I have a question for you.
Okay.
The question comes from Enterprise HNCC 1701H, and they want to know, who designed the Andromeda Ascendant? They want to know who is behind that iconic design. First of all, what did you do on Andromeda?
I was one of the staff writers and story consultants and all that other Canadian title nonsense.
Did you have a fine time working on the show?
I did I did. It was always fun. Even at the times when it wasn't fun. So yeah, it was always great.
But you don't remember who designed the ship?
I don't. We had our special effects team up in Vancouver. I bet Robert Wolf would know the answer to this question.
I do not have him. You know what? I would feel uncomfortable calling him out of the blue, putting him. I love Robert and I love his wife, but I wouldn't call him. I don't know him well enough to put him live on a show.
Yeah,
put him on the spot. He'd be like, Burnett, what do you do? What? You want me to what?
I'll get you that answer so that you can provide it at a later date.
That would be great. If you could get me that answer and provide it at a later date, I would love to do that.
Awesome.
So that would be most fantastic. And of course, you've been on the show recently, so thank you. And by the way, can I pin you down someday after the 12th of February to come back on this show?
Why, yes. Yes, you can.
I was thinking about that. Okay, then maybe, I don't know what day the 12th is. Is that a Tuesday? I have no idea.
I feel like it's something silly, like it's a Saturday. But we should talk about dates.
Yes.
For sure.
That would be most excellent because I have plans. I was thinking about certain things. If you go onto Twitch and you look like in the top 20 of things on Twitch, interesting things that are there listed.
Very, very interesting things.
And we should exploit that.
Yes.
But that's all I'm going to say. On that note, I will let you go. But please ask Robert Hewitt Wolf who designed the Andromeda Ascendant.
I will ask him.
Well, thank you.
Sure, man. I will talk to you later.
All right, I'll see you.
Okay, bye.
There you go. You heard it from the horse's mouth. Whenever I can call somebody and get an answer live, I'll try and do it. But what do writers know? Come on. This one comes from Duncan Kinnaird. Hi, Rob. Just a quickie. to let you and your fellow connoisseurs know that the Ascend crew have put up their behind-the-scenes video on their channel. Hope you take a look. Ascend is one of the movies in the Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseurs Film Festival that I think is actually very good, and you should check it out. And yes, there's more about that coming soon. Oh, wait. I put too much. I'm not going to send that there. I said too much. I took too much. Let me erase that, and I will put this video. Their father, the Ascend crew, Daddy-O, suggested to his kids that they should make a movie, and they did. There, my friends, is the behind-the-scenes link to checking that out, and that comes from Duncan. All right, Dunk. He says Dunk on this, so I can call him that, I guess. We're on a first-name basis. Bronze Age Slacker writes in. Hi, Rob. I love reading history, and for some reason, the story about Mary Shelley and the Year Without a Summer came to me, so I figured that I would share. The 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora in Indonesia was one of the most powerful volcanic eruptions in recorded human history, killing tens of thousands of people in the nearby islands and spewing forth unfathomable amounts of ash, debris, and lava. For the next 3 years, the ash from this eruption spread around the globe, blocking out the sun, lowering temperatures and causing crop failures around the world. It also caused spectacular sunsets in England and the creation of great works of art. Because of the Tambora eruption, British poet Alfred Lord Tennyson was inspired to write the following poem. Had the fierce ashes of some fiery peak been hurled so high they ranged about the globe? For day by day, through many a blood-red eye, wrathful sunset glared. I guess it's blood-red eve. Wrathful sunset glared. British painter J.M.W. Turner painted the Chichester Canal, and in the summer of 1816, an 18-year-old Mary Shelley, her lover and future husband Percy Shelley, poet Lord Byron, and 2 others took a vacation that ended at a lodge near the shores of Lake Geneva in Switzerland. The friends reputedly smoked hashish, and because occultism was popular at the time, they told ghost stories. The gloomy days caused by Tambora's ash doubtless helped set the mood. The friends decided to have a contest to see who could write the best horror story. It was at this time that Mary got the idea to write about a scientist who created life. She ended up writing her novel, Frankenstein, or the modern Prometheus. I was thinking X-Files. Frankenstein is often called the first science fiction novel, but it could also be called the first horror novel. Mary Shelley finished the book a couple of years later, and it was published in 1818. Mary Shelley was certainly one of the earliest imagination connoisseurs, and at only 20 years old, remarkably talented. Anyway, it's just something that fascinates me, how Mother Nature's fury can devastate human civilization and at the same time inspire beautiful and fantastic pieces of art. Best regards, Bronze Age Slacker, Kurt A. Man, this is a bumper crop of letters today. Thanks for that one. What a great... That letter in itself was poetic. I want to thank you for sending it in. Thank you very much for that one. Omar94. Hi, Rob, moderators, and Post-Geek Singularity. I know it's a tradition for people to watch Christmas movies during the winter holiday, or how people watch Thanksgiving movies for Thanksgiving and horror movies for Halloween. I do that, even though I don't celebrate Christmas and Thanksgiving. However, I've started doing something like this a year ago for another film. February 2nd is Groundhog Day, and even though I don't really do anything for the occasion, I will now always watch Groundhog Day on the named holiday every year, almost like how the movie has a time loop, as I will now do that every year on the same date. That's just something I will now do. I don't know if you or others do a tradition type thing or something like that for a date each year, but I would be very interested in hearing from everyone who hears this. Thanks, and live long and prosper. Well, Omar94, I got one for you. December 7th. What movie do I always watch? No, not Tora. Star Trek the Motion Picture. December 7th, 1979 was the day of release, and whenever I get a chance, every December, I have to revisit that film and remember what life is all about. And there's a lot of it. Dean Mikatich writes in and says, "Hi, Bob, or Rob in the PGS. Thank you for answering my letter on studios not taking risks. You've stated that with cinema closures, the studios can't afford to carry on making the $100+ million films because they can't make their money back from VOD or selling it to a streamer. This is why those expensive films that are yet to be released are getting pushed back and back and back. I'm looking at you, No Time to Release, die. However, the studio still needs to make money, so some studios are biting the bullet and putting some films on VOD, and Warner Brothers has decided to release all of them in theaters and on HBO Max at the same time. We will see how well that does work for them in time, though doing that also means they're losing a huge chunk of change, as here in the UK, we've been in lockdown since New Year's, and it's looking to at least, it's looking to last at least another 2 months. We don't have access to HBO Max, and with the cinemas closed, that's a lot of money left on the table. Yes, they did release Wonder Woman 84 to VOD here in the UK, but there was no marketing for it, so not a lot of people know about it. Even once we come out of lockdown and everything starts opening back up again, do you really see the numbers pre-COVID rushing back to the big screen? I do not. Personally, I don't think that will happen, and it may be at least a year or more until pre-COVID numbers return, and that's assuming we don't go back into lockdown. This brings me to the point of the letter. If the studios are not able to make $100+ million films for the foreseeable future, this means they have to make smaller budget films so they can keep the studio afloat. With these small budget films, can't the studio take more risks? With cheaper films, it's more likely to make money from VOD or selling it to a streamer or even physical media. Yes, it would mean less CGI, etc., but that's not a bad thing, as it would mean that the filmmakers would have to be more creative like they were back in the 70s and 80s and 90s. Big-name stars that appearing in them would have to be willing to take a pay cut. Let's face it, they can't ask for million-dollar paydays with these smaller budget films, and if they want to carry on working, they have to take a pay cut. As I've said, it may be some time until those $100+ million films start happening again, if at all. What are your thoughts, Rob, and the PGS? Peace and long life, Dean Mikatich. Good question, Dean. I have to tell you, Ashley Miller comes back with an answer. First of all, hang on. Ashley Miller, his answer about who designed the Andromeda Ascendant is Ken Rebel, and that's Ken, Rebel, Rabehl, Rebel. So it's Ken Rebel designed the Andromeda Ascendant. So Dean, let me respond to Ashley. Many thanks. You know what? Ashley sent me his IMDb page, so I'm going to put it in the live chat. This is one of the benefits of working in the business for a long period of time, because you usually know enough people. They talk about the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Well, if you know enough people, you can find out anything you want in the motion picture business or television business by knowing people. So there you go. Here is the IMDb page in the live chat for the man who designed the Andromeda Ascendant for the Gene Roddenberry's Andromeda TV series. Many, many thanks. I've now said that to Ashley. That was fantastic. So, Dean, here's the thing. I think that the problem is that the studio business has changed so much that studios need that kind of big revenue in order to continue. And yeah, they still need to make movies, but if they're making movies, for $30, $40, $50 million, and then they're feeding them to a streaming service, there's no chance that they can then turn around and make $300, $400, $500 million worldwide off those movies, because theaters aren't open. The studios are going to have to change their own business. And what's really interesting is and I think that was one of the things I was talking about at Warner Brothers. Someone like Toby Emmerich, who's running Warner Brothers and who's produced, when he was at New Line, he's produced over 100 movies, and he wrote Frequency. And there's a lot of stuff going on at the studio where people are trying to find their relevancy again. Like, they're not making movies, there's no productions going on, and everybody's jockeying for position. The streamers are getting healthier, but I think that the studios, they can't go backwards, because they no longer can really survive making those small films. And even if they did make those small films, they still have to be able to put them in theaters and make those kinds of profit margins. Unless Warner Brothers, which the studios that do know how to make movies, if they're going to keep feeding HBO Max, we'll see how that's going to work. It's going to be interesting. I don't presume to know what's going to happen, to be honest, but I'm interested to watch what's going to happen. I don't know what will. I don't know. This comes from Ash Chowan. Ash Chowan. Ash says, "Riddle me this: is Batman Forever the best Batman film from the Burton Schumacher era?" By Ash Chowan. The scene starts out with a shadowy figure bathed in darkness, lost in thought. Tension and dread fill the air. The musical score anxious and despondent. "All I can think about every second of the day is getting Two-Face," says Dick Grayson, pacing about the Batcave, lost in thought, fragments of light reflecting on his solemn face from the waters below. "He took my whole life. When I was out there tonight, I imagined it was him that I was fighting, even when I was fighting you, and all the pain went away. Do you understand?" A morose Bruce Wayne emerges from his armory, making his way to Grayson. "Yes, I do," he says, sympathy in his voice. "Good, because you got to help me find him. And when we do, I'm the one who kills him," proclaims Grayson. Face to face, Wayne stares at the vengeful youth. Dreadful memories of his own engulf him. "So you're willing to take a life?" "As long as it's Two-Face," Grayson declares without hesitation. Wayne sighs. "Then it will happen this way. You make the kill, but your pain doesn't die with Harvey. It grows. So you run out into the night to find another face, and another, until one terrible morning you wake up and realize revenge has become your whole life, and you won't know why." "You can't understand," says a frustrated Grayson. "Your family wasn't killed by a maniac." "Yes, they were. We're the same." "Then if we're the same, Bruce, help me, train me, let me be your partner," Grayson pleads. "No, I can't. You still have a choice." The words linger as Wayne stares into Grayson's disapproving eyes. "Look, Bruce, I'm a part of this, whether you like it or not." Grayson backs up and runs off into the shadows, determined to get his way. Wayne turns around and notices Alfred, his faithful butler and surrogate father, who'd been watching the entire time, a look of empathy on his withered face for young Grayson. More than a quarter of a century after its release, Joel Schumacher's Batman Forever, the third entry into the Batman franchise, which began in 1989, still has one of the best scenes in any Batman film ever made. Despite its outward cartoonish facade, Batman Forever is not without merit and has many more dramatic scenes punctuated with great dialogue, like the aforementioned scene between Bruce Wayne and his new ward and orphaned Dick Grayson. There is much to appreciate in Batman Forever. In fact, dare I say it, it's the best Batman film from the Burton Schumacher era. 26 years after its release, it's time we appreciate what Batman Forever got right instead of emphasizing what it didn't. With Joel Schumacher at the helm, Batman Forever was not only tasked with creatively reviving the Batman franchise after Tim Burton's nightmarish Batman Returns, but also reviving it commercially after Burton's film underwhelmed at the box office and alienated sponsors. And boy, did Batman Forever step up to the challenge. Val Kilmer was cast as Batman Bruce Wayne. He was coming off a critically lauded portrayal of Doc Holliday in Tombstone and gave Batman Forever a much-needed jolt after Michael Keaton declined to reprise his role for the threequel. Reprise his role for the threequel. Tall and broad-shouldered, sporting a sharp jawline and a booming baritone voice, Kilmer offered a physically imposing Batman that many fans hoped for. Jim Carrey, then at the height of his box office stardom, and recent Oscar winner Tommy Lee Jones were cast to portray the villains Riddler and Two-Face respectively. Their casting's a real coup for the studio. Nicole Kidman, then married to Tom Cruise, gave Batman a love interest who is much more than a damsel in distress. And up-and-coming actor Chris O'Donnell, fresh off the success of Scent of a Woman, opposite Al Pacino, rounded out the cast as a badass Robin, complete with a fashionable earring and trendy buzz cut. The film opened on June 6, 1995, to a then-record three-day take of $53 million and finished with $184 million domestic haul, $387 million adjusted for inflation, and $336 million worldwide. The highest-grossing film this summer, a double platinum soundtrack with the chart-topping song "Kiss from a Rose" by Seal, and merchandising flying off the shelves, Batman dominated the zeitgeist of the summer of 1995, as he once did the summer of 1989. Batman was back as the crown jewel for Warner Brothers. Despite the success of the film, many view Batman Forever in hindsight as the beginning of the end of the Batman franchise, and after the release of the subsequent catastrophe that was Batman and Robin, Batman Forever has been mired in a retroactive malice it doesn't deserve. Much of the hate comes from Schumacher's creative decisions for Batman Forever, from the lighter tone to the bright color palette, to the crackling slapsticky villains, to Batman having a gadget for just about any scenario. His vision harkened back to the camp of the 1966 Batman television series starring Adam West, a cartoonish era Batman fans had long tried to escape. Oh, and how could we forget the Greco-Roman statue-inspired nipples on the Batsuit and that brief shot of a Batman sculpted rubber ass, an obvious moment of levity in the film. 26 years later, these elements are still the most talked-about features of Schumacher's Batman reign. I just know I'll always go down over the nipples on Batman, starting with Batman Forever, Schumacher reflects. Such a sophisticated world we live in where two pieces of rubber the size of erasers on old pencils, those little nubs can be an issue. It's going to be in my tombstone, I know it. Often overshadowed by a cornucopia of flashy villains, Batman was relegated to a supporting character in his own films, but unlike prior Batman films, Batman Forever attempted to do something its predecessors didn't. Focus on Batman and make him the star of his own film, and that's where Batman Forever succeeds, and why it's the best of the Burton-Schumacher era of Batman films. Batman Forever finally delved into the character of Batman, particularly focusing on his duality. Throughout the film, Wayne struggles to live his life as both millionaire CEO by day and masked vigilante by night, oftentimes becoming one at the expense of the other. This is further accentuated when a love triangle forms between Bruce Wayne, Dr. Chase Meridian, and Batman. A cruel joke on Wayne, for it's Batman who Meridian is enthralled with, at least at first. Wayne is given the binary choice of being either Bruce Wayne or Batman, but never Bruce Wayne and Batman. Wayne's prime conflict in the film isn't with the villains, but with himself. Does he want to be Batman? Does he need to be Batman? Can there be a balance between Batman and Bruce Wayne? Is he destined to be Batman forever? So many questions. It's no wonder the Riddler was chosen as one of the villains of the film, tasked with solving the greatest riddle of all. Who is Batman? That just so happens to be a riddle Batman is trying to solve as well. Batman Forever does a great job of taking the Bruce Wayne-Batman dichotomy seriously, almost to the point of being an existential examination. Almost. Unearthed deleted scenes showcase how gloomy and introspective the film could have been. From a scene in which a pensive Wayne struggles to determine if Batman is the cause of all the mayhem and villainy in Gotham City, and if his quest has any meaning after avenging his parents, to another scene in which Wayne goes to the pitch-black caverns of the Batcave and comes face-to-face with the literal bat that haunts his dreams, feeds his fears, and resolves his destiny. There's much left on the cutting room floor that could have added to and expanded the narrative. But after the grim and dark debacle of Tim Burton's previous Batman Returns, which, by the way, I love, it's no wonder these cuts were made. To be adult risked alienation. To be too adult risked alienation. The film had to cater to the masses. However, the final theatrical cut doesn't feel abridged and still works without those scenes, as Wayne is able to find the answers he seeks regarding his struggle with duality and his acceptance of his true identity. Wayne's new role as a surrogate father to an orphan Grayson adds even more subtext to the drama. Guided by a hatred and a desire to exact revenge on Two-Face, the villain responsible for his family's murder, Grayson looks to Wayne for guidance. Like all good fathers, Wayne leads Grayson away from the same mistakes he made as a youth when drunk on vengeance. The themes of justice versus vengeance resonate throughout their cerebral encounters as Grayson starts to form his own duality while Wayne comes to terms with his. In the climactic showdown with the Riddler, a newly defiant Batman faces a literal binary choice posed by the Riddler. Save Meridian, Bruce Wayne's girlfriend, or Robin, Batman's partner, from imminent death. Only one can be saved. Batman saves both of them, symbolizing his victory over his struggle with duality. He can have his bat cake and eat it too. A triumphant Batman, finally accepting and at peace with his internal struggle, stands over a defeated Riddler and reveals, "Poor Edward, I had to save them both. You see, I'm both Bruce Wayne and Batman. Not because I have to be, now because I chose to be." Beyond the story, the film is also a technical and visual feast that still inspires awe and holds up after all these years. Stephen Goldblatt's Oscar-nominated cinematography gives a vibrant, colorful comic book feel, skewing the drab color palettes of the previous entries, no longer feeling relegated to the suffocating confines of sound stages and exaggerated matte paintings. Gotham City is vast and massive in scale. The spires of Gotham City rise to dizzying heights. The city finally realized in a mixture of full-scale, miniature, and CGI shots that bring the vast metropolis to life in all of its comic book glory, thanks to Barbara Ling's glorious production design, and Elliot Goldenthal's score was a worthy successor to Danny Elfman's iconic arrangement, blessing the franchise with yet another memorable Batman theme. I can still hear Goldenthal's Batman theme and hum it at any given moment, a true testament to his musical craftsmanship. Batman Forever also brought to life the comic book page, giving fans of the comic what they'd always hoped to see depicted on screen. Iconic shots of Batman soaring through the concrete jungle of Gotham City, cape dramatically blowing in the wind, were finally realized. The modern cinematic iteration of Robin, Batman's faithful sidekick, finally made his debut with a comic-accurate costume and a black outer cape with yellow inside, and those toys, those wonderful toys, from a stocked armory of bat-shaped weapons to an upgraded batsuit with sonar modifications, the iconic Batmobile along with a Batjet and a Batboat, and the villain's diabolical device capable of reading minds and transferring brainwaves into a host. The comic book page, in all of its absurdity and glory, was cinematically realized in Batman Forever. But the thing we remember most is when Wayne made a mention of the city of Metropolis. Long before any concept of a shared cinematic comic book universe was even a tangible idea, this little Easter egg in the film got everyone's heart racing. Do Superman and Batman inhabit the same world? Could we see Superman and Batman in a movie together? Batman Forever opened many doors that we never thought were possible in a comic book adaptation circa 1995. Before comic book adaptations dominated the box office with multiple releases a year, a Batman film every 3 years was what we had to look forward to back in the 90s. The success of Batman Forever caused Warner Brothers to fast-track a sequel for summer 97. What resulted was Batman and Robin, one of the worst films ever made. Among many of the film's mistakes was that it made Batman a supporting character in his own movie again, something that Batman Forever remediated. Years later, Schumacher apologized for Batman and Robin to fans that had high expectations after the success of Batman Forever. And could you blame them? Batman Forever had it all. There is much to defend in the film. In a 1995 interview with Charlie Rose, Schumacher, responding to New Yorker movie critic David Denby's trashing of the film, defended his vision. Well, it's sad when life has changed so much and some people live in a time, in a place, in an anachronism within themselves. It's hard for a East Coast critic to really understand what entertainment is for the rest of the planet. I don't know what David is comparing Batman Forever to. Potemkin? This is a Batman comic book film. I think there's a strong story in this. It introduces the Robin character. There's a love story with Val. We have 2 great villains in the movie and a lot of fun. I'm sorry that all the hard work and energy, the beautiful sets, the costumes, the jokes, the choreography disturbs him so much. I'm sorry he finds our film disgraceful. However, I can't agree with him. Well, I can't agree with him either, Mr. Schumacher. Batman Forever is pure, unadulterated joy, but it's the movie's deep reverence for Batman as a character and the thoughtful examination of him that caused me to revisit the film. I finally cast childish jokes aside and suppositions piled on the film and appreciate it for what it was, even if it did take 26 years to ascertain. Rumors swirled as recently as last year's DC fandom event of a Schumacher cut of Batman Forever. Sadly, there won't be a director's cut. Schumacher died in June of 2020. Some still besmirch Batman Forever as the beginning of the end of the Batman film franchise. On the contrary, I feel Batman Forever saved the franchise, giving it the best Batman film from the Burton Schumacher era, and a Batman film that still holds up a quarter century later. Well, you know what? If I were a teacher and I were grading your paper, I would give you, Ash, an A. What a great article. And if you have not seen it, and we have because we were talking about it yesterday, but I'm going to put this up right now because it was dropped 2 days ago or 3 days. Was it Monday? Was it Monday that they dropped this? Let's go see, shall we? Because this is worth looking at. As everyone knows, we've got my beloved Hot Toys, ladies and gentlemen. What did Hot Toys announce days ago? What did they announce? Surprisingly, they announced finally, after years of promising, Hot Toys announced that they are going to do figures from Batman Forever. That's right, Batman in his sonar suit and Chris O'Donnell's Robin. I know what you're saying. Is it true? Is it true? Yes. And not only is it true, but these bad boys are up for pre-order right now. Check that out. I mean, these, my friends, these are peak sideshow figures. I mean, these things, I wasn't going to necessarily get these figures. Like, I'm not the biggest fan of Batman Forever, certainly not like our boy here. But I think that after seeing these figures, let me give you a little bit of a closer look at them here. Look at this. Those are pretty nifty figures. You gotta love those, right? I do. I mean, I'm gonna pre-order that shit. I mean, if you want them, please know they don't come out until 2022. So the world could come to an end before we get them. But there you go. So how interesting. You know what? It's like shrimp or plate of shrimp. It's just like in Repo Man. Things just happen for a reason. Let's see what you guys are saying. Let's jump into the old Chatterooski here and see what is happening. I got to go back days because I haven't been here. I have not been here. Where was I at? Is that Richard? Richard says, what happened to the Expanse? Listen, I thought the Expanse was relatively strong this year. It started out strong. The first 4 episodes are great. I thought here's my the big weakness I felt this year in the Expanse is they spent too much time with this family drama between Naomi and Aros. It just went on too long, and what they really missed out on was the conspiracy about the rogue the rogue Martian fleet, and what happens at the end of this season. And I feel that they started with it strong, and then they kind of dropped it until the very end. And I think we should have been seeing that storyline develop. And it really felt a little moribund for about 3.5 episodes, which was a bummer. They should have resolved that Naomi situation in 1 episode, but instead it just went on and on and on. I think they missed a real opportunity. I don't know why. But other than that, other than being bored with Naomi going back and forth into that airless part of the ship, like what, why, do we have to watch that many times? How many times do we have to see her gasping for breath? It was annoying. Richard goes on to say, Clarice not getting good reviews. Can Fuller get a restraining order on Kurtzman now? Yeah, for those of you who haven't been paying attention, Clarice, the sequel to Silence of the Lambs, the new CBS series that's being created and showrun by Alex Kurtzman, is surprisingly not good. I'll tell you, I read that screenplay. I read the pilot script, and I was like, really? Really? That's what you're giving us? What a slap in the face to Brian Fuller. Kurtzman comes in, takes co-creating credit for Discovery, which means a lot of money out of Fuller's pocket, and does what he did to Discovery. And then, as Brian Fuller's trying to get the 4th season of Hannibal, which he has said how many times before that they were trying to get the rights to Silence of the Lambs because it was all going to be about Clarice Starling. Oh, nope. Now Kurtzman's going to do that too. If I didn't know better, I would think Alex Kurtzman has some kind of a vendetta against poor Brian Fuller. I don't know what's up there, but anyway. Richard says, good show. Have a good rest of your night. I didn't see those before, but I'm reading them now. Jared Snyder sends in a tip and says, hi, Rob. Expanse question. Why does Mario have no tattoos? Why does he look like he just came off stage with Wendy and Lisa in The Revolution? Marco. It's Marco and Aros. That's what I said. I did read this, actually. He was a fanatic with a master plan at the end of last season. Now he just seems wanting to get even with Naomi. I know, man. I think it's crazy. And he did have a master plan. I mean, even he should have been, conspiring with, obviously, where was his meeting with the rogue Martians? It would have been great to see. Bumming out. But it still was good. Eric Gantz says, one of two. I'm enjoying the current season of The Expanse. If I remember correctly, the biggest storylines in Nemesis games were Amos and Peaches on Earth and Naomi's situation, with Alex and Bobby and Holden serving as the framework. The biggest deviation seems to be Drummer and her storyline. Both seem to be combinations of different characters and events. Oh, and the bit connected to the ending cliffhanger. They seem to have avoided that altogether so far. Yeah, I've already read these before, but that's okay. I agree with you. I think they needed to develop more. I mean, they've obviously combined things and combined characters, but I just thought that the propulsive plot of the show ground to a halt with those 3 episodes, and I don't know why. Maybe that something happened in editorial. I don't know. It seemed odd. Chloe is here. Says, given the entertainment platform that YouTube has become, one of the strangest things I've ever seen on YouTube has to be when a couple of YouTubers ask for a volunteer to appear on their little experiment of having an individual to sell their soul by going through the whole process while they filmed it. To my surprise, well, given today's society, not really, of the amount of people that applied to do it. There are no shortcuts in life to success other than your own hard work. Well, the lottery. Wait, there's a couple of YouTubers who asked for volunteers to appear on their little experiment of having an individual sell their soul? And people signed up? That's actually a good premise for a movie. Steve Jocks became a member of the channel. Justin Jorgensen became a member. Thanks, man. Justin Jorgensen says, greetings, Rob. I'm a massive fan of the show, and I've been for so long now. I've written in a couple of times, and I have a request. I know it's a massive long shot, but here goes. I have my own show, Just in Time to Chat. I see what you did there. And I talk about movies too. I would like to have you on as a guest on my show. I only have just over 100 subscribers, but I really do try, and having you would be a dream come true for any imagination connoisseur like myself. I wasn't sure how else to contact you, but please consider it. You know what? I'm going to be like Spock at the end of Mirror Mirror, who says, I shall consider it. But I will. I shall consider it. Now, by the way, I appreciate your gumption. Yes. Journey's End said, hi, Rob. Missed the last few streams. Are there updates on the Intergalactic Imagination Connoisseur Film Festival timeline? There are. I have sent out some emails to people. I want to hear back from them. There are filmmakers I want to interview, and I want to announce the semifinalists and do the award show. So please, if you're a filmmaker and you're watching this, look out for an email, because I've sent some out, haven't heard back yet. I've sent a few out, and there's still some films I'm going to put up this week. So yeah, let's finish this off. I want to give some awards to people. So Journey's End, you'll know. Jeff Yerke is here. Jeff Yerke says, and Mrs. Yerke says, hi, Rob. Greetings from both Mrs. Y and me. So my question today is, what sitcoms or streaming 30-minute comedies do you watch when you just want to unwind and get silly? I figure you can't watch movies all the time. Live long and prosper, the Yerk Man. I don't. Honestly, I do not watch sitcoms. When I just want to unwind, I watch YouTube videos now. I watch to see what other people... I don't mean to be I don't watch comedies. I don't watch 30-minute sitcoms. I either, you know what, I like to watch interviews or more documentary-related material. That helps me unwind. So, John became a member. Reagan Media became a member. Philip Moore became a member. This thing repeats all these. I'm not going to read who becomes members. I've read these 1,000 times. By the way, I appreciate all of our members. And I think we're going to do another member chat tomorrow after tomorrow's show. So look out for that, members. If you have questions or things you want to ask me, I'll answer them. Glenn Taylor sends in a super chat and says, I know Kevin Feige said no X-Men for 5 years, but in MCU's timeline, it's been 5 years. Just saying. Oh, I know. I think, Glenn, we're going to see some interesting things happen in the next couple weeks. The Harsh Truth says, theaters are going to be fine. What real movie fan doesn't want to go to a theater and see a movie like Avengers or Star Wars? They do. I agree, they do. But you know what? What can I say? I mean, I don't know. I hope so. I hope so. That English Gent sends in a super chat. Thank you, That English Gent. Hi, Rob. Do you plan to do a Season 5 review of The Expanse? I understand they try and stay as close to the books as possible, but this season it feels they overdid it and didn't allow for theatrical adaptation. I don't usually, I don't review stuff per se. Sometimes I do, but I don't. I think that the Expanse was, to me, quickly, it was a wildly uneven season. I loved the first 4 episodes. It felt really epic, and then it sort of got mired down in the Marco Inaro storyline and Naomi and their struggle over their son. I really think they should have cut that down, and I felt like the rest of what was going on was lost. They were following this conspiracy. Bobby and Alex were following this conspiracy, and then it just stopped. And for 3 episodes, I think they should have combined, because what was going on with what happens with that was a big deal, a big deal, especially if you've read the 6th book. And it just, at the end, people are like, wait, what's going on now? What are they doing? Who's doing what to whom? So, yeah. Oh, Willow Yang is here. Willow says, I know you've debated this before, but it was a while ago and you might have changed your mind since. Did Thanos kill half of all plants and animals in addition to sentient beings? If he did, doesn't that decrease the universe's resources? I don't think he destroyed plants. I think he did. I think he probably did destroy animals, but probably not plants. But they're only resources if you think of animals as food supply. But I think, if half the people disappear and half the animals disappear, there's still enough to go around. Willow says also, it would be more awkward if a woman was giving birth during the snap and it's the baby that gets dusted, and then 5 years later, while she's going about her business, she's suddenly in the middle of giving birth again. Yeah, I don't think that's how it would work, but yeah, I think you're right. That's, I was saying that yesterday on our stream. Very interesting, like what happens during the snapping. But I think, as somebody pointed out, the Hulk was smart Hulk, when he snapped his fingers back, and he would have made sure. It's just like the old idea that we were talking about on John's show. If you're on an airplane and you were part of the snapping, not the fappening, but the snapping, and you get snapped out of existence, and when you get reconstituted, are you going to be in midair and fall to your death? No, because I think that however that works, I think Hulk would make sure people were set down or taken care of. Mr. Tickle Trunk sends in a super chat. Insematic sends in a super chat. Thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Tickle Trunk says, on the topic of remastering, the Mass Effect game series is getting one right now, but they're removing shots of female butts to reduce the appeal of the male gaze. They should add male butt camera work instead, actually be inclusive and make more people happy. You know what? I don't understand. The male gaze is biologically wired into me. I like my male gaze. Just because I have a male gaze doesn't mean I'm going to, denigrate the women in my life or people that I know. But I think the male gaze is part of what keeps our civilization moving. I don't understand. I feel like, to be honest, yes, the proliferation of porn is all around us. You can see whatever fetish you want. Even on Twitter, my stream is full of porn actresses dropping in hardcore streams, right? But everybody else, the world around us, the actual real world, not the virtual world that you're watching, the real world has become surprisingly chaste. It's so weird. And it's like somebody's intentionally bleeding out our humanity. No more double entendres, no more witty bon mots that can have... it's weird. Now, I understand there's ways of doing things without showing disrespect, but I don't want to live in a world where the male gaze is supposed to be diminished. This idea that the male gaze is turned into something bad. You can have the male gaze and still be respectful. It's so weird. I just don't get it. They're reducing female butt shots. Okay, if that's really what you're going to spend time doing, I don't get it. Why don't we celebrate all the physical form of human beings? I don't get it. It's so weird. I'm glad I'm not in my 20s today. What a boring existence it would be. Mr. Tickle Trunk says, remastering means, you go on to say, remastering means we get 2 versions of something we love, the original and a second shot on the same piece of art. Just don't ruin the original. Censorship or art is the death of a part of someone who created that art. Like butts, more is always better. I agree with you. I just don't understand this age we live in that's so quick to let's get rid of all of these things. Let's just turn us all into bland people that everyone's the same, and we'll live in this homogenized society where everyone lives in their safe little bubbles. And gross. That's not what human existence is supposed to be about. I hate it. Circus of Five says, Rob, do you think it's fair to say that the Hobbit films uphold verisimilitude when compared against the tone and world of the Lord of the Rings movies, but doesn't hold verisimilitude when compared against the tone and the world of the original book? You know what I have to say? No, I think tonally, the big problem that I had with the Hobbit trilogy is that tonally, it feels goofy. On one hand, you've expanded this trilogy. You've taken The Hobbit and expanded it out into 3 movies, and you want it to feel epic, and yet so much within it was goofy. It's wildly divergent in tone, especially when meeting all the creatures. When you go underground, it's just tonally all over the place. Whereas Lord of the Rings is an apocalyptic story about the end of the world. The Hobbit is it's an unexpected journey, but it shouldn't be apocalyptic. And it kind of became that way, and it goes from being really goofy. And my whole problem with the Hobbit was it's wildly divergent in tone. It really is, and that's the problem that I have with it. So it's a tonal issue, and yeah. Dave Atkins sends in a super chat and says, "Your hair looks awesome, man." Does it? Well, thank you. I've just been growing it long, luxurious gray locks. And, of course, I dream of having it cut like Simon Le Bon, circa the Wild Boys video from 1984. Elizabeth thinks that's a little goofy, and I shouldn't do that. But I always wanted my hair cut that way, and I never had it long enough to do so. So I'm going to rock that, man. I'm going to rock the Simon Le Bon. Well, one day, maybe. But thanks for that, Dave. I would personally love to see an X-Men MCU movie with Alfonso Cuarón directing and Vince Gilligan writing. Ooh, that's a great... Dave, you and I park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. I'd love to see that. Bring that on. Chloe says, to me, the Battle of the Five Armies would have been better if they had went more with the animated version, where the goblins came riding in on wolves instead of arriving on giant death worms. The whole battle just seemed to be on a smaller scale. I don't think you're wrong there. I don't think you're wrong. Chew sends in a super chat and says, greetings from an Az hat. That would be Az. That would be heel versus babyface. This is my first super chat, but I just wanted to say, you are a joy to listen to. Thank you. Well, Chew, you're a joy to have be an imagination connoisseur. Welcome to the channel. Glad to have you here. And thank you for supporting. That's very nice. And I'm glad you found me via Az. One of the great experiences I had last year was getting to know Az. He has a keen mind. He's a funny guy. We obviously park our shuttlecrafts in the same shuttle bay. And it's just been nice to meet somebody across the pond. Well, in this case, the Atlantic. I guess it could be the Pacific, but then you have to go all the way across Asia to get to England. But it was great meeting him, and I really enjoy his company. So I'm glad you came here because of that. And I love that people... I didn't realize until I think yesterday when I saw people calling themselves Az hats, because I don't have time to look at the live chat, but with 4 of us, I could. I love the fact that there are Az hats. That's great. Bobby Hatch Kowal says, speaking of purposeful blurriness, what are your thoughts on the resurgence of vinyl records? I have my old vinyl handy, but only for nostalgia and a format of last resort. Okay, I was like a vinyl snob growing up. Like, I hated American vinyl because it was cheap. It was full of pops and static, and I would only buy, when I could, UK or especially Japanese vinyl. And the resurgence of vinyl, I mean, it's fine, but still, you have as good as your stereo system is, you still have a diamond stylus scraping over a piece of vinyl. And while now you've got better vinyl than ever, the heavier gauge vinyl that you can now get here in America as par for the course is great. I mean, I still have bought some things, I've bought some vinyl records. I got this great Frankie Goes to Hollywood box set I spent way too much money on. But I think it's weird. I still prefer a great digital recording. I know people could say, well, it doesn't feel as warm as. That might be true. Analog sound is different than digital sound. But nowadays, with great sound systems and the kind of engineering and remastering that's happening, I would prefer. I can't deal with surface noise and pops and clicks and whatever. Yeah. Cousin Neil, who's working on the Space Rob video game, and he made a film that you should all watch. I think it was the last film I put up, the first film that you see when you go to the page on the left side. Cousin Neil says, I just watched It and Of Itself on Hulu. People have been telling me about this. Truly encompasses every person you meet as a story to tell, takes storytelling to the next level. I don't know much about it, so I need to watch it. I definitely need to watch it. Insematic sends in another super chat. So, Cousin Neil, I will get on that. Thank you, Insematic. Appreciate that. 501 sends in a super chat and says, just don't see studio streaming can rely solely on subscriptions in the long run for profit when box office was so much more. Well, the one thing about streaming is, you have the potential to have a great windfall, like with an Endgame or an Avatar or a Titanic. But with marketing costs, so one thing about streaming is Netflix has now 200 million subscribers, and they're jerking their price up by $2. So think about that. It's $17.99 a month. Like $17.99 a month times 200 million. Well, that's a lot of money. And to have that, to know that's what you're getting every month, studios up and down and all over the place. So the streamers have a much more solid base from which to work off of. And that's something that's new and unique. So not all, remember, for every movie that they made that made a ton of money, there's always a movie that tanked. And that's bad. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. Brandon Shee sends in a tip and says, Rob, I saw The Phantom Menace when I was 14 and loved it. It was really the movie that got me into Star Wars. I consider the prequel series vastly superior to the Disney trilogy. If I may, Rob, I would like to write 3 letters giving my perspective on each prequel film. I'd love that. Please do. Send them in. Mahir, is it Hake? Hake? What a cool name, Mahir Hake. Love you, Rob. Be well. What are some ways to get into movie financing? Do you want to get into movie financing? Give me a call, buddy. To get into movie, that's a good. If I knew the question, I would be in movie financing myself. I don't know how you would get into movie financing. You have to be an entity that's interested in financing films. First of all, I would imagine, and then you have to have access to money. But you also have to be smart about it. You have to really know what you're doing. But that's a good question. Getting into movie finance, I've never had anybody actually ask me that question, because look, if movie financing is really anybody who's financing things, whether it's private equity or. See, here's the thing about independent movie financing. Let's say you're looking for. Here's the hard part about it. You can have all your ducks in a row. You can have a great lookbook. You can write your business proposals, all of this. You cannot guarantee a return. I hate to say it, but you can't. You cannot guarantee a return to your investors. You can tell them you'll give it your best shot, your best efforts. But let's just say you raise $1 million, right? You raise $1 million and you actually make a movie that has stars in it, some stars in it. But let's say that you decide to make a film about, I don't know, a story about something that's deeply personal to you, like maybe losing a loved one, and it's all about maybe how crazy you went in the month after your mother or father died or something. And you get even good actors. You make it for $1 million, and the movie's actually brilliant. It's actually really, really good. Well, it's like, okay, you've made a movie about grief and losing your loved ones. You spent your $1 million, and the movie's actually good. Well, then you have to sell it. Then you have to put it on the festival circuit, and you never know. And a movie like that, who's going to watch it? I mean, everybody can relate to it, but if it's just a slice of life story, and then how are you going to guarantee selling it? You have to, in my mind, you have to make $1.3 million in sales so you can pay back your investor, and that's just breaking even. That's giving the money back that you already owe. But that's the problem. You can never guarantee anything. You can make the greatest movie in the world, but you can't guarantee that you're going to sell it. So it's really hard. What you need to do is there's different kinds of investors that you want to find. Investors that particularly, maybe they want to see their names on a movie. Maybe they want to executive produce a film. Maybe they want to see if they can do it. I don't know. Or maybe, you can find somebody who is a patron of the arts, that kind of thing. Or maybe you find somebody that specifically wants to get involved in the entertainment business. It's hard. There's many different ways, but finding independent financing is a very difficult thing to do. And getting into independent financing, the problem is financing movies is such a risky proposition that anybody who has the money to invest goes into something else because the guarantee is better. So that's what I always tell people. Snake Burton says, as Red Letter Media would say, Kurtzman is a hack fraud. Well, he's not a hack fraud because he gets stuff made. I mean, I know what you're saying. So, yeah. It's a bummer. But, yeah. He's getting them made. He's getting paid. He's got shows going. He runs Star Trek. He runs the Star Trek franchise. Discovery, Picard, Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks. I mean, he's got an empire going. Unfortunately, none of it's good. So, yes, even Lower Decks. I mean, I'm like, okay, it's a Star Trek comedy show. Not what I'm interested in. Stubble McShave says, a theory. Became a member, announcements may be repeated each month after the date for joining. That could be. Also, how much time do we have to admit short stories? Until April, you can find all the rules for the short story contest are on the website, theburnettwork.net. David Hilton says, did you ever meet Forrest J. Ackerman and tour his infamous Acker Mansion? Yes. Not only did I meet Forrest J. Ackerman on many occasions, I've even had breakfast with him, with Dr. Donald Reed, the founder of the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films. And I met him on numerous occasions, and I'd been to the Acker Mansion like 3 times. And yes, he was a very delightful guy every time I met him. Justin Jorgensen sends in a tip and says, hello again, Rob. Thank you so much for considering coming on my show. I sent Mike an email. Also, recently in college, my professor yelled at me because Lord of the Rings Return of the King is my favorite film of all time. Apparently, it's too much of a blockbuster. Ridiculous. I hate that snobbery. I mean, what were you going to say? That I don't know, that The Sorrow and the Pity is supposed to be your favorite movie? Too much of a blockbuster? That's such a silly thing to say. That's such an academic thing to say. Like, your movie taste is being judged because that movie won all the Academy Awards it was nominated for. I would say that's a pretty good movie to have as your favorite film. That's just snobbery. What are you going to do? Richard says, I have a small feeling that Expanse Season 6 will be like Game of Thrones Season 8, and Laconia will not only hyper-advance, but fight Earth Mars and be defeated by the 4th episode before we fight the paintbrush aliens. Then Bran becomes king. What Richard is referring to is Expanse spoiler, but if you don't know what happens in the book, Laconia is a rising empire that is being, well, in the way the show is going, the rogue Martians are starting their own empire using alien technology and the proto-molecule, and they come back as the Laconians. So there you go. Alexander Wilson says, Spike Lee's Do the Right Thing is now available on 4K Ultra HD for the first time. Are you going to get that? Yes. Even though I recently picked up the Criterion set, which is amazing, but that movie is so beautiful to look at. I love the cinematography. I think that's definitely a must-own. Because you know what? If you're always going to do the right thing, always do the right thing. You have to get the Do the Right Thing 4K disc. That, my friends, and Alexander, you know this to be true. Search your feelings. You know it to be true. Well, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, gentle beings, kind souls from across these, the 28 known galaxies, I'm going to bring this episode of Robservations, the show about something, Robservations episode number 612, to an end. Because I've got things I have to do. I was just told, as a matter of fact, I have some news that refers to something that I've been being told all the time. Remember I've been talking about how this as of now unnamed Netflix project I've been working on for almost 2 years was going to be announced on the 12th of February. It has been pushed. It's going to be announced on the 16th of February. I know you're all waiting with bated breath to find out what that is. It's actually pretty cool. There will be a large contingent of people who will be excited, I think, about the show. And I was watching some of the first season yesterday. It's pretty dope. It's really good, if I do say so myself. I mean, as I said, I played a small part in it, but because of what it is, the nature of what it is, it's very neat. I'm proud to have my name in the end credits. It's very exciting. So, Richard says, great show today. Well, thank you, Richard. I do appreciate that. I'm going to end the show. I want to say thank you to my moderating staff. I want to say thanks to Mike Bodden, to the Richard, to Justin Toner, to Joshua Levesque. I don't know who else is here. Bunyan Snipe is here from the UK. Did I say Justin Toner? I did. I want to thank you guys for being a great moderating staff. And tomorrow, for those members at certain levels, we're going to have another members only after chat. So those are fun. We're going to do that tomorrow after the show. And of course, we did, because Elizabeth has been swamped with work, unfortunately, on Whining About Movies. We're getting off to a bit of a slow start for Viewer's Choice, but we'll catch up. We moved Miller's Crossing to tomorrow, so we've had to push. But legitimately, by the way, Elizabeth has done some great artwork. Maybe I'll have her show it. It's really good stuff, but she's had to write papers, and she was being stressed about the work she had to do. So it legitimately is her schoolwork. She's been swamped, but she is doing great work. So we're going to move Miller's Crossing to tomorrow for Viewer's Choice, and that's a bummer. Support either via Super Chats and tips. I want to thank you for writing such amazing letters. I have a backlog of letters to read, so don't think I'm caught up, because I am not. And it's great to be here with all of you and the channel. It's just fun. I'm just having fun. It's these not having breaking entertainment news. And tonight's Thursday. You know what that means? That means that WandaVision is going to be on tonight at midnight. And I'm at WandaVision. I am all over WandaVision. I'm thoroughly enjoying WandaVision. I hope you all are as well. I think Thanos over here is enjoying WandaVision, aren't you, buddy? So anyway, on that note, I will say, remember, every person you meet has a story to tell that you have yet to hear, and all you have to do is listen. And with that, I say to all of you, have a better day. And I mean that. I mean that sincerely. And on that note, I'm going to, actually, you know what? Let me make sure that nobody, yes. Dean became a member, and Tibirsk 1 became a member too. So thank you. And on that note, I'll see you tomorrow on the John Campy Show, and I will be back here. Adios, muchachos.